recollection. They had intercepted the communique 10 days after the Emperor's call had been sent. It was a small Tau outpost, a ways north of the Aquitas sector but not too far that the message would go dead anytime soon. The Sanguinium martyrs had responded as quickly as possible before rushing into the warp, arriving only a few days after the message had been sent. The cruiser would remain outside of visual range of potential sentry ships while Mashes set out and recovered the Herald. And no sooner. The astropaths had reported a growing null in the void, one not caused by the Tau. The planet was heavily forested enough to hide the signs of Tyranid invasion, but Mashes knew that would change soon, and the Imperium would not be so willing to assist the Tau this time. Lord Marcos was kind enough to lend his personal ship so Mashes and the Valhallans could head down to the Tau planet. They had not spoken much, instead focusing on their disguises and preparing for the Herald. Whoever this man was, Mashes would have to treat him with the utmost respect, as if he were the Emperor himself. Though avoiding eye contact might be a bit excessive. "Lord Mashes," Alexis called from his comm station. "We're being hailed." "Adjust course so we don't provoke the Tau," Mashes replied. "I'll take over negotiations." Alexis nodded and whispered something to Nikolai, the two making adjustments while Mashes moved towards the comm station. "This is Cutter Iconoclast respondin'." "Cutter Iconoclast," a heavily accented voice called. "Please state your business and your cargo." "This is Rogue Trader Mancuso," Mashes continued, pitching his voice a little lower to try and achieve the gruff, antagonistic tone he had come to expect of rogue traders. "I'm respondin' to one of your transmissions sayin' that you needed a man to transport some, whatever it is you call us." There were several murmurs beyond Mashes' hearing, though he could tell they were murmurs of relief. "Your timing is impeccable, Gula," the Tau replied. "We were beginning to worry that you would not arrive and we would be disadvantaged." "Whatever," Mashes continued, a grin breaking out across his face. "The Herald must have been giving the Tau a hard time. Good for him, the Imperium needed more aggressive actions like that. Just tell me where the cargo is and I'll take it off your hands, nice and simple. We are sending your navigator the coordinates. Sentries will be notified of your presence." "Much appreciated. We'll get this done with no problem." With that Mashes clicked off, the Tau's voice replaced by a few chuckles from Alexis. "Going for the Necromunda gangster route, I see." Alexis asked. "What? It's never failed me before." Mashes countered. "And it's not from Necromunda, I was trying for a Nicodemian accent, by the way. Never heard of it. Nicodemus was hit with an orc invasion back in M41, part of my training as an acolyte involved hunting down a few that were causing problems with the manufactorums. Hang on, we're entering Tau airspace." Mashes angled the cutter downward, the lander shields flaring slightly as they passed through the atmosphere. Mashes never considered himself a great pilot, but he managed to level off the ship with little difficulty. Quietly he pulled the ship around several cloud banks, slowing their velocity and dropping altitude as they neared the Tau base. It was like any other Tau settlement, plenty of round corners, simple dome design, all laid out according to whatever plan their precious greater good called for. Off to the side a large section of land had been cleared as a landing pad, fighters and bombers parked neatly to one side, and already Mashes could see a small gathering of beings on the path closest to the base. Mashes angled the lander once more, pulling to a steady hove just in front of the entourage. The lander shook slightly as it made contact with the ground, panels and instruments rattling slightly before coming to a stop. Matthias placed the ship on standby before rising, pulling on the red coat and bandolier he would be using for a disguise. "Keep an eye on the Xenos," he said as he passed Alexis and Nikolai, the two Valhallans busy checking their hellguns and armor. "They might try a double cross if we're not careful." "Roger that," Alexis replied, flipping on the power clip for his hellgun. "We'll make sure the package is secured." "Good." Mashes turned towards Nikolai. "What about you? Any reservations?" "Tau will be in front of us," Nikolai said. "Makes it easier to keep an eye on them." Mashes nodded, striding towards the exit while Alexis and Nikolai formed up behind him. "Let's hope this goes smoothly." The ramp lowered with a hiss, Mashes taking a moment to adjust to the rush of light before stepping out onto the Tau world. The aliens were what he had come to expect from the Tau, short, deformed, blue-skinned creatures with odd armor and weapons. They seemed to shift more than what would have been expected, the soldiers eyeing one another as if they had been berated by a commanding officer. Mashes turned his attention to the humans in the Tau's midst. Perhaps they could provide an answer to the aliens' skittishness. The first was a young woman, probably only in her early 20s. She was a little taller than the Tau, with a round face highlighted by a neat bob cut hanging down to her shoulders. She was not too stocky, but not as rail-thin as a high-born lady would carry herself, and her figure was shapely enough that Mashes guessed many a young man would have fawned over her on her home world. The other woman was something else entirely. She towered over the aliens surrounding her, and they were sure to keep their distance from her. Her body was covered in a grey shawl, the cloth bunched around her shoulders to reveal a more pointed face and long, brown hair. But it was the woman's eyes that drew Masha's attention. Unlike the alien slates that were the Tau, and the poorly hidden optimism from the younger woman, hers were hard, weathered, like one of the greatest among the Adeptus Asteroutes. Mashes did his best to conceal a small shiver that ran down his spine, and he found himself focusing more on the younger one rather than make eye contact with the other. Whoever the tall woman was, she was dangerous. The Emperor chose his herald well. But Mashes knew better than to allow fear to enter his mind. Nice welcome in committee, he started as he and the Valhallans came to a stop in front of the Tau. So, who's needin' a trip back to the Imperium? We wish no quarrel with you humans, the leader of the Tau replied. Take your fellows and leave, please. Mashes nodded before turning his attention back to the humans. Well, ladies, he said before gesturing towards the lander. If you don't mind steppin' this way, we'll be on our way. The young one paused for a moment, giving a glance to the older one before taking a tentative step forward. She was stopped when the elder placed a hand on her shoulder. Before we proceed, she started, her voice like a regal bell. I would like to know the names of our rescuers. Name's Mancuso, Mashes responded. The others are Alexis and Nikolai, can't be too careful roamin' around here. Who are you? I have many names, she replied. You may call me Celeste for now. This is my student, Terra, and we wish for transport to the nearest Imperial outpost if it can be arranged. Any specific planet? That is for me to decide. Many names, concealed mission. She's definitely the herald. Right. Now that we've had our little meet and greet, we'll get going. Celeste gave a short nod and strode forward, her student falling in place behind her. Terra gave Mashes a nervous glance before looking away, a small blush forming on her face. Nervous one, isn't she? Alexis asked as he pulled alongside Mashes. A couple of thugs turn up as rescuers, wouldn't you be nervous? Mashes shot back as he hurried to catch up with his passengers. Bit cramped in here, but there should be enough space for you to sit comfortably, don't want anyone getting ruffled, do we? I suppose it will suffice, Celeste replied before turning back to Mashes. Though I thought that the Inquisition would take more care in transporting important passengers. There was a long pause, Mashes and the Valhallans looking to one another with uncertainty. Inquisition. Mashes chuckled. Lady, we're not Inquisition, we're just rogue traders. Your clothing, weapons, and ship are all top rate, much too expensive for a group of your size unless you had outside funding, which does not appear to be the case as you lack any charters or sigils from a larger group, Celeste started. You over-exaggerate your actions and mannerisms, hinting that you are either acting or you are overconfident to the point of stupidity, the former being more likely because you have the eyes and grooming of an intelligent man. Most rogue traders would not just drop into Tau-occupied space to pick up two humans out of the kindness of their hearts, and you made no further negotiations with the Tau to suggest that you had other business. Also, I have been to Nicodemus, and your accent is dreadful. Mashes stood in silence for several moments. Am I really that obvious? He asked. Celeste gave a short nod, and Mashes sighed. And I'd been practicing, just in case. You just need some work, that's all, Celeste relied. Though perhaps next time pick a disguise other than a rogue trader. Perhaps, Mashes massaged the back of his head before continuing. I suppose I should reintroduce myself. Mashes Velas, Ordo Zenos. Pleasure, Celeste replied with a nod. I suppose you are here in search for the herald of the Emperor. Yes, Mashes said. And given the way you carry yourself, your attention to detail, and your familiarity with inquisitorial disguises, I'm guessing you are the herald. There was a pause, Celeste looking from her student to Mashes. I am she. The cutter was much cruder than Twilight would have imagined. Celestia had told her that the Imperium was a reasonably advanced, incredibly powerful empire, but sitting within the Imperial ship felt like someone had placed her in the back of a delivery wagon. It was cold, dark, and the multitude of corners were lined with dirt. The whole thing rattled as they rose into the air, Twilight holding onto a nearby table as she waited for the shaking to stop. Celestia and the others did not seem to mind, the one watching them, Alexis, Twilight reminded herself, staring blankly ahead as they continued upwards. She supposed this was normal. Humans were a spacefaring race, they should be used to this sort of thing. The princess was equally understandable, and she still had to maintain her illusion and hide her armor. Soon, the shaking stopped. Twilight allowed herself to relax, releasing the tension in her arms as the rattling shifted to a low hum. We just broke atmosphere, Mashes said over the ship's comm system. It'll be a few more minutes until we arrive at the Sanguinium Martyrs. I'll be down there once Nikolai sets our course. I'm in space? Twilight asked herself. This whole trip so far had been unlike anything she had thought, but now she was in space. No pony save perhaps the princesses had been to space, and yet here she was. In space. Twilight let a small chuckle escape her lips. I'm in space. I can't believe that I'm in space. So, Terra was it? Twilight let out a small yelp as she turned her attention to Alexis. You seem excited. Something on your mind? And no. Twilight stammered. I've never been to space, all that much. You'll get used to it, Alexis replied. Nikolai took a little more time, he vomited all over his kit the first time we left Valhalla. The commissar threatened to shoot him if he didn't get it cleaned before our first deployment. Alexis chuckled, at what Twilight had no idea. Why would someone laugh at the possibility of someone else's death? So, where are you from? Alexis asked. Twilight paused, casting a glance towards Celestia. She had remained silent, but Twilight could see a subtle shift in her eyes once Alesis started talking. It's a small world. Twilight started. Why, you probably never heard of it. Galaxy is a big place, so you're probably right on that account. Got a boyfriend? At this, Twilight's face flushed red. Her brain tried and failed to come up with a good answer, her jaw clenching and unclenching involuntarily. Still Celestia remained silent, though a small shift hinted that perhaps she was stifling a chuckle. You're supposed to be helping me, princess. Alexis, Mashes called from across the room. The man had changed out of the gaudy coat and bandoliers, instead dressing in clean green and silver robes and armor. Without pretenses, he stood straighter and yet still seemed relaxed, enough that Twilight found herself calming as he approached. What are you doing to our passengers? Asking them a few questions, Alexis countered. Might as well get to know them on our trip to Terra. I'm sure what you have in mind is not as productive as you think, Mashes replied. Thank you for keeping an eye on them, but I can take it from here. Go assist Nikolai in navigation. Yes, my lord. Alexis gave a quick nod, moving to leave before turning back to Twilight. So, can I get that answer later? Twilight blushed again, and Mashes gave Alexis a quick glare before the Valhallan disappeared. Once he was gone, Celestia spoke. You gather interesting figures under your command, she said as Mashes took a seat across from them. The Inquisition takes what it can get, those two happened to be good soldiers, and I needed their skills for several missions. A pause. But then you would already know these things, being the Emperor's herald and all, you two must have spoke on a variety of matters before you came out here. I have known the Emperor all my life, Celestia replied. He has had plenty of time to educate me in all manner of topics. Really? Mashes raised an eyebrow. Has he really been manifest in this reality for that long? Oh no, Celestia shook her head. But then he is the most powerful psyker to have ever lived, communicating with one such as myself would have been no great task. Fair enough. Why were you in Tau space when the Emperor called? A teleportation accident. I'm not sure if you have noticed, but the warp has changed considerably in recent years. Mash's nod was one of calm, but Twilight saw a few twitches that said otherwise. I'm not a psyker, but I know of the various mishaps and tremors in the warp. It was how we were able to find you, after all. Celestia raised an eyebrow at this, as if expecting him to explain. My team's psyker is a bit off. I see. Celestia replied. I suppose you would like to know where the Emperor is. It would be helpful, yes. There was a pause before Mashas leaned forward. Celeste, we need this information as soon as possible. The Imperium stands on a knife's edge, and the Emperor returning may be the thing that saves us all from destruction. If you can lead us to him now, we might stand a chance. I know, Celestia replied. But my orders were specific that I be brought to Terra. Only then will the Emperor fully reveal himself, when the time is right. Twilight's eyes darted between Celestia and Mashas. Finally, the Inquisitor gave a defeated sigh, hanging his head slightly. I can respect that, he said. And far be it for me to question the Emperor's will. I just wish that, maybe this once, he would be a little less mysterious in his ways. Inquisitor Mashas, Celestia said, giving the man a soft smile. A prophet once said that he who holds fast to his faith and tempers his patience will be rewarded in all that he does. The Emperor may not have returned to us yet, but once he does, I assure you that you and your men will see your patience rewarded. This did appear to raise Mash's spirits, but the Inquisitor quickly regained control of himself. Why do these people have to be so reserved? Twilight thought. We'll see how right you are, won't we, he said finally before rising to his feet. I need to make sure that all the necessary preparations are made for our arrival. I'm sure Inquisitor Marcos will have more questions for you once we arrive. Mashas turned his attention to Twilight, who shrunk back slightly. If there is anything else you need, you should be able to find me. And with that Mashas departed, leaving Celestia and Twilight alone. Celestia returned to her silent vigil, closing her eyes for a few moments as if meditating, while Twilight shifted in her seat and thought over the conversation that had just been held. Mashas seemed conflicted, but he was good at hiding his emotions. Why, though? Was there something discouraging with the idea that their ruler would return? Or was it just reverence? Ponies did tend to get nervous around Princess Celestia, and from what she could tell, these humans revered the Emperor as their god. Who wouldn't tremble in the presence of a god? But, Twilight thought, her eyes drifting to where Celestia meditated. Is that really what she wants from her people?